What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and today I wanted to talk about something that I haven't really gone in depth about before. Now, I made a video on this show like halfway through the season when it was airing back in spring, and I did do like a full review video of the season with my friend, but I just wanted to talk to you guys one-on-one, just me, and I wanted to explain why I love this show so much, because I've commonly been referencing this show in how Marvel can do things right, and I haven't really talked that in depth about why I like a lot of elements in this show before, so I wanted to do that in this video and just examine this show. And of course, this is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I would say this is my favorite thing to come out of the MCU franchise. It tells a story that feels like right. Feels like it does the superhero style story right, but it also feels realistic enough to the point where I can become invested. It's set in a palpable world of its own, so I can still get invested in it without it just becoming over the top and ridiculous. And I mean, the story makes sense, which was something that was not present in the show before it. With the show before it felt like a fever dream. WandaVision didn't even, I was confused by what I was watching. Nothing made sense in that show. Things just happened. Characters knew pieces of information for no reason, and it was just terrible. But then just watching this was like a breath of fresh air into Marvel, and I didn't even want to watch this because I was so sick of Marvel after WandaVision. And then a couple people, including my buddy, Israel Animation, he said, this is good. And I was like, all right. Because this is one that I was actually interested in. Even back when it was announced, because I thought the concept of it was interesting to see, what they would do with it, with the story of Sam Wilson after he takes the shield from Steve Rogers. I thought that would be interesting to explore, Sam and Bucky, these two kind of lesser characters that aren't as prominent or, big name characters, I suppose, right? The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And this show just does such a good job with these characters. It sets them in a realistic place. They feel like real people dealing with human issues. And apparently the studio wanted to cut out the scene where Sam goes to the bank and the bank's basically being racist and not giving him a bank loan. It's I can't believe they wanted to do that. But it shows that the creative team on this were very adamant about the story they were trying to tell and the message they were trying to convey. And that's what I like about it. It portrays things that are problems in real life and how we can solve them. And there are really great quotes and moments in the show, and I feel like it can do nothing but inspire change and inspire people to make right decisions and do better things. And I just love it, but just the character arcs are so well defined, and I don't know why people, for some reason, think that some of the characters don't have an arc. I find Bucky's character to be fascinating, the fact that they finally explored him in a way that was different from the films, where it was just, Bucky is sad, Bucky feels bad. It wasn't like that. It was like Bucky, this person, because it's a story told about these characters that are lesser known, they actually make that part of the characters and their journey, and Bucky specifically is a character who's been defined by other people for a majority of his life. So now he has to figure out a way to live his life and do things on his own without having someone else to define him. And there's that really great scene with him and Sam towards the end of the show where he just tells him, you gotta stop looking to other people to define you. You need to go to other people and be of service. You go to the people that you wronged and say sorry because you think it'll make you feel better, but you need to make them feel better. You need to give them closure. And I think that's a really great message about real life as a whole. The idea that by giving other people closure, by helping other people, it'll typically make you happier, I just love that. I think it's so well done. And then Sam as well, this character who very obviously wants to make other people happy, very obviously wants to do what he thinks is right. He wants to, live up to Steve Rogers. He wants to do what Steve wanted. He wants to take up the shield. But he also feels pressured by society as a whole and the limitations they place on him as a black man, and he's very nervous about that. And I just wanted to address this because I'm really annoyed by this misconception. People seem to think that Sam should have just taken the shield and that Sam never had his reservations about actually becoming Captain America. What would the show have been about if Sam didn't have any problems or wasn't concerned at all about becoming Captain America? It would be about nothing. It would be about Sam being Captain America, flying around, punching people, hitting them with a shield, and he wouldn't have a character arc. So I find it fascinating that they actually figured out a way to develop him. They decided not to do that because that's what Endgame did, right? It's like the Endgame started, they put the characters in an interesting place, then they jumped to the future and they cut out all of the development of those characters. It's like you have Sam take the shield and, being concerned, saying it feels like it's someone else's, and then Falcon and the Winter Soldier starts, it says, I don't know, 6 months later, and he's just already Captain America going out beating people up. That's what Endgame did. But the writers, the creative team on this show, they didn't do that. They told this really in-depth, fascinating story about this character and his struggle. And he says to Bucky, can you accept that I wanted to do what I thought was right? And how Bucky and Steve, these people who were so heroic, Steve, the person that, despite how society painted him as the perfect person, still didn't think about the effect of passing such a large mantle on to someone like Sam would have. He didn't think about the effect it would have on Sam, and with him being a black man. And then Bucky says that to Sam at the end. He says, I never thought about the effect or the what it meant to you, and I'm sorry. And I love that so much, and I think both those characters work so well together. These characters that have together been defined by someone else, and then are now trying to figure out their own paths, and then in a way both discover their own paths in life through each other. I think that's so great, and I love their dynamic. I think Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie are amazing, and even just beyond that, it actually, that's amazing that they developed these two characters that were such minor background characters in past films and turned them into my favorite characters in the whole franchise. I love them. And even the new characters they introduce, I think, are great too. John Walker is amazing. He's such a fascinating and realistic character. I've seen people saying he's relatable. I agree. Walker is such a fascinating character, and Wyatt Russell plays him so well. A character that, is a good person. He's a good person deep down, but is just, once again, pressured by society. The government forced him into a role that he wasn't prepared for. And then he's an unstable, traumatized war veteran, and then he ends up killing that guy. What did the government think was going to happen? I've seen people saying this, the fact that the government probably knew that would happen, and they were just going to replace him with someone else after that. They would probably just keep cycling through different people because they didn't care. They didn't give a crap. They didn't think about the true history of this person, how he felt. No one ever asked John, how he felt, and he felt, you understand him. I thought in the first episode of this series, when I was watching it while it was airing, oh, this is going to be the cliche antagonistic character that comes in, gets in the way of the main characters, and, whatever else. But he's not. He's not like that, because in the next episode, the first scene isn't them. I was actually confused at first, and then I realized, oh, it's this character. And the fact that you actually get, a good chunk of time at the beginning of the second episode dedicated to exploring this character, who I thought was just going to be a minor player, really shows how human this show is, really shows how much it cares to develop characters. It doesn't rush through elements. They actually focus in on the characters, their relationships, how they feel. You get this whole scene just dedicated to this one character and how he feels about this role that he's taking on. It's just great. Then Carly Morgenthau, the antagonist, the character that a lot of people don't like, I think she's really well written as well. I mean, I don't like her, obviously. She's a terrorist. Or, I mean, I guess the whole point that Sam is trying to make is that we shouldn't brand people as terrorists. But obviously, she's not a great person. But I do like that, like, Sam's whole message, right? The idea that oftentimes as a society we shrug off people who actually have good arguments, despite whether or not the actions they take are justified or not, often have arguments that we should listen to, that we just choose not to. Sam says these people were able to, run or disobey the strongest governments in the world, and no one has bothered to ask why. And I find that really fascinating. And I think Carly's character is basically just a symbol, of oppression. And I like that they just, the way they use the world, the way they use the elements of the franchise is so much better than other stories where, in the MCU, where it's just, we gotta force in reference, we gotta force in other development, random thing, random element from a movie. There are brief references, but they're mostly played up for comedic effect, which I feel is fine, because the humor is actually well handled, but we'll get back to that in a little while. But I love the way they use the Marvel world in this one, because, as I just said, with the character of Carly Morgenthau, the world, serves as, the kind of over-the-top, fictionalized, I guess, elements of the franchise are used to reflect a real-world message, and I think that's really great, the way they use Thanos' snap as a way to represent border issues in real life. I like that a lot. I think that's really great. And then, the way they end it, too, is, it's not like typical Marvel. What's an example? Spider-Man Far From Home, right? The post-credits scene of Spider-Man Far From Home is a setup for a Captain Marvel movie with the Skrulls or whatever. Something that will probably have very little, if anything, to do with Spider-Man. Then let's look at the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The post-credit scene deals with a character from the show, Sharon Carter, and her development, and, setting up what she's going to be doing in the future. It's setting up directly what will follow this series or this show, or what, so it's not just setting up something completely unrelated that you probably don't have interest in. Okay, I like Spider-Man Far From Home. Oh, what the frick is this? This has nothing to do with the movie I just watched. Why did I wait for this? But everything in this show is something to do with the story of this show. There's no unnecessary setup for something completely unrelated. It's all related to this series, which I appreciate. And like I said, the way they use the world to reflect real-world issues, the world of the franchise, without ever feeling over the top, I think was really well done. And it feels so far, even more so than other Marvel movies, feels so disconnected from the big, over-the-top Marvel stuff. It doesn't feel crazy, I can actually get into it. And it, that's because it feels detached from it. The Captain America movies slowly became more and more disassociated with a grounded, realistic take to being superhero nonsense. The first one, which went off the rails a little bit towards the end, but was mostly kind of a World War II focused story, but with superhero fantastical elements, which I thought was fun. The second one, you have to tie it into the Marvel Universe. They tied it in. They had Black Widow, a bunch of superheroes show up. Very much tied into the Marvel Universe, but it's not super over the top to the point of absurdity. Then Captain America Civil War just goes completely off the rails to the point where it becomes basically an Avengers movie and doesn't even need to be called a Captain America movie. And it's just so over the top, right? It's just completely ridiculous. But this feels even more so detached from all that. There aren't any random unnecessary cameos or characters showing up. It's not like Doctor Strange showing up in Spider-Man. It's just these characters telling a story about them dealing with human problems, dealing with Sam dealing with racism, Bucky dealing with depression, PTSD. John Walker dealing with PTSD from his time in the army. It's just like all these people on a human level. Like the first episode is just characters going around in their daily life, basically. You know, and I love that. It feels so far detached from all this ridiculous, over-the-top Marvel nonsense. Like, this feels like when I think of this, I don't think of Marvel. I think of just the Falcon and the Winter Soldier as its own story. And that's the thing, like, there are a lot of things where I'm like, oh, that's Marvel. That's Marvel Studios, I don't know, Endgame. Because it feels like that. It feels like, oh, yep, this is Marvel. This is Marvel's cliche, stupid stuff. This doesn't feel like that. It feels like its own thing, and I can rewatch this. I've already rewatched this show like multiple times over the past couple months with different family members and friends, and they've all liked it. And you know, my sister, who I watched it with, she's not even big into Marvel, and she liked it. You know, it does feel in certain ways more akin to something like The Dark Knight. You know, with you know, kind of how realistic it is dealing with real life issues, but still having kind of the fantastical superhero elements that just add a nice, you know, fun little flavoring in there so it never feels too depressing, so it's still an entertaining watch on its own, right? I think it's really well done. And, you know, something I wanted to say about this show as well is that the heroes in it feel like heroes. When they do heroic things, it feels exciting. They feel like heroes. They like the actions they take, the things they do, things they say, they feel heroic. That's the best way I can say it. The heroes feel like heroes. Because the thing that I get so tired of with Marvel movies nowadays is that most of the characters in them, like with an exception of characters like Spider-Man and stuff, because he's like innocent, he's a kid, right? But like Tony Stark, Captain Marvel, countless Star-Lord, countless characters, they're all just sassy, sarcastic assholes. They don't feel like heroes. They don't feel like they really do heroic things. Like in Spider-Man Homecoming, Iron Man saves the boat of people, but just more so as a way to punish Peter than to actually like be heroic. Like he just feels like he's doing it to garner attention, right? When people do things that are heroic in this show, it feels satisfying. Like when John Walker shows up to the final battle and tries to save the truck of people while literally like being like swarmed by terrorists, you know, jumping on all these super soldiers, jumping on him, and he's just there trying to knock them off him. Like, I think that's awesome. Like that feels like, when I see that, I'm like, that is like heroic, you know. And I want my heroes to feel heroic. You know, and I'm just like, I'm tired of all these characters just being sassy, rude assholes. Like, that's all they are. They don't feel like heroes, you know. But like Sam and Bucky, and even John Walker, all these characters, they feel so real. Even Sharon Carter. I've seen people complain about her, and this is where I'm kind of going to get into my next section about kind of giving a rebuttal to common criticisms. People say that Sharon's motive comes out of nowhere. I don't even feel like that's the case. Like, she turned to basically the world of crime, became the power broker because of the fact that the US government forgot about her. People seem to be saying that her infiltrating the government at the end is her, like, you know, trying to get revenge on Steve or something for leaving her or something. Like, no, that's not even the case. It's just the fact that she was forgotten about, even more so than Sam or Bucky, who are still allowed by the government but are still restricted by the government. She was just forgotten. She was discarded because no one cared about her. And, you know, whatever, like, she was branded an enemy of the state. Everyone forgot about her. So she just, and it's clever too because they barely ever reference her. So it's like the characters in the show and the audience basically forgot about her. So the fact that she comes in there, I just think the way they wrote her was actually really well done. And I'm interested to see how they'll develop her further in the future. But like, yeah, I don't, there's a bunch of things I don't get the criticisms of. I don't get the criticism of, I've seen commonly is that Sam doesn't have a motive for not taking the shield until the 5th episode. It's very obvious that Sam's concern from the very beginning was racism and discrimination, and that he would have to face that if he took up the mantle of Captain America. He didn't feel ready. And at the end, after hearing the story of Isaiah Bradley and experiencing all these things, he just decides, you know what? Fuck it. He's just like, I'm going to do it. And, I may die, but I'm not going to let anyone tell me that I can't fight for this country. And I think that's freaking awesome, And I don't get why people think that wasn't his motive from the beginning, that he was never trepidatious about taking up the shield. He says in Endgame, it feels like someone else's when Steve handed it to him. He reminds us of that in the first episode. And you even have that scene where he's talking to Don Cheadle's character, Rhodey, in the first episode. And it's almost like Rhodey's one of the few people that can kind of understand him, right? And then for the rest of the series, Bucky's always like, why did you give up the shield? Why'd you give up the shield? And he knows that he can't explain it to Bucky because he won't understand, And then as the series goes on and Bucky, experiences all these things, sees Sam experiencing all these things, he realizes that he didn't understand what Sam was going through. So it is explicitly stated in the 5th episode, Sam's reasoning for not taking up the shield. But it did exist in the series beforehand. It's not like they never wrote in a reason for why Sam didn't take the shield. It was just never explicitly stated out loud. Are people that dumb that they need it explicitly stated to them that Sam didn't take up the shield? What did you want him to say in the first episode? Just say out loud, I didn't want to take up the shield because of racism. Did you need the show to just spoon feed it to you like that? No, it was pretty obvious to me throughout the whole thing that was his motive and that he just didn't feel comfortable saying it until Bucky realized and until, he experienced this stuff with Isaiah Bradley and heard his story, And the fact that he, puts up that statue in the honor of Isaiah, that is just the most wholesome thing anyone has ever done in this franchise, and it brings me to tears. Why are so many of these heroes, quote unquote, just assholes? Why can't we just have people like Sam? He's freaking awesome, but yeah, I don't understand that, the, Sam's arc. And then the idea that, the villains are inconsistent or something. I've seen people say that the villain's plan feels like it changes from episode to episode. And yeah, that's the case. But that's kind of the point. They're disorganized. They don't really have a plan. And there's that line from Zemo in one of I think it's the 4th episode, right? He says to Sam, Carly won't stop. She will escalate until she kills you or you kill her. And that's what happens. Carly just continuously escalates throughout the series, doing more and more harsh things until she has to be stopped. So I don't understand that. It's just proving Zemo's point. It's showing Zemo's whole speech there, whatever, that quote basically encapsulates the entirety of what happens with Carly Morgenthau and her terrorist group. And I like that they even show that even her followers are starting to kind of become trepidatious about what she's doing towards the end. I think that was really great as well. Just little moments like that are great. And, it's I don't understand the idea that the villains are inconsistent or something. Yeah, they don't have a plan because they're a group of random people who feel oppressed by the government and they're going to take random actions. That's the whole point. They're unpredictable. I've also seen this criticism that Bucky shouldn't have let Zemo out of prison and that it's too rushed and that they needed to establish more of a reason because in the episode where they free Zemo, Carly hadn't taken any serious action yet until the end of that episode. The reason I see for Bucky freeing Zemo is not because of Carly. It's because of his own personal motivation to stop the super soldier program. Because of his experience and the torture that he went through, he wants to stop anyone else from going through that, and he wants to stop another Winter Soldier program from potentially rising up. So I see him freeing Zemo as a reluctant way of him going, all right, if I've got to do this, then I might as well do this to, annihilate this thing that caused me so much pain and prevent it from causing anyone else any pain. That's the way I see that. I see him freeing Zemo as more of a personal thing for him, because he wants to destroy the super soldier program. He knows Zemo's not trustworthy. He doesn't like Zemo, but he knows what his ideology is, and he knows that at least in that department he shares their same ideology, So I think that is why he freed him. That's my perspective on it. If you have a different one, that's fine too. And then I've also seen this common criticism that the show doesn't have external conflict. And what that means is that the characters don't really have a reason to or for fighting each other, and that the show is so focused on different perspectives and internal conflict between people that there's no external conflict or force that it's building towards. I disagree. Like I said, Zemo literally states that Carly is going to become more extreme and that she will escalate. So there's that point. And the fact is that the whole show is about internal conflict leading to external conflict. There's the internal conflict between Sam, Bucky, and Walker, and all the different reasons why they feel each of them should or should not be holding that shield, and eventually that leads to them coming to blows. That's just one example. There are plenty of other examples of the internal conflict between characters eventually leading to external conflict. So I don't understand that criticism either. And something else about the show. There are real stakes and consequences. That's something that I've never felt about any of these other superhero things. It's just, I said this about WandaVision. I was worried by the end of the show it was going to become shooty shoot, punch punch, lasers, finale. That's what I like to say. And it's because it's about a bunch of invincible superheroes fighting each other. I never feel tension because I know where it's going to end up. But with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because of the fact that Carly is unpredictable and because of her terrorist group and all this, and, they have no real plan, it adds to the tension of it because you don't really know how things are going to end. They introduce so many new characters, and the main characters, even though Bucky's a super soldier, and Sam has all of his prowess and skill, they're still vulnerable people. John Walker, for half the show, is a vulnerable person. He doesn't have the serum. Sam, throughout the whole thing, is still a completely vulnerable human being. So they put a lot of these characters in these kind of situations where they're fighting super soldiers or other characters, and there's a real sense of tension because you actually worry about them, and eventually freaking Lamar gets killed, John's friend, So there are real stakes and consequences, and there's real tension in action moments. The fourth episode, I would say, is probably my favorite of the season, because of the fact that the whole episode has this building sense of tension and dread throughout it, because you don't know what's going to happen next. Because it's all different characters and their perspectives. The characters and their motivations, perspectives, ideologies are so well defined because of the time the show takes to explore them, so that when these moments take place, it feels really suspenseful. So the fourth episode, by far, is my favorite because of that sense of tension that it strikes, but that's what I wanted to say. It has real stakes and consequences. The action scenes are extremely well done. They feel like they have a real sense of tension throughout them. And yeah, that's what I'll say about that. I freaking love that. And, I'll say that the worst elements of this show, I'm going to talk about bad because I don't think it's a perfect show, but for me, the good far outweighs the bad in this show. But the weakest elements of the show are Zemo, the Dora Milaje, and the conclusion of John Walker's character. So let's go through these one by one. Zemo, what I mean by that is that I actually like the conclusion of his character, at least, that we see in the story, right? Him having a little bit of acceptance at the end of his story, saying to Bucky that he never blamed him for all those things that he did wrong, that despite his kind of flawed ideology, that Zemo kind of forgave Bucky in the end. I freaking love that. I love the acceptance at the end of his story. The thing that I don't like about Zemo's character is the contradiction at the beginning that he's just like a rich guy. Like, that never sat right with me. And it's because he was a really well-defined character in Civil War, and his motives and, you know, his ideologies, and the fact that he was just a normal person. And that was what was fascinating about that, was that he is just a normal guy, no powers, no abilities, just his manipulation tactics. And that he, unlike any other character with superpowers or godlike abilities, was able to tear the Avengers apart. I like that. And it's like he goes to the effort of mailing this parcel to short out a freaking power converter so that he can interrogate Bucky. But then we come here and he's just like, oh, I'm rich. So it's like, wait, why did you even need to ship that and like go to all these lengths in Civil War if you were just descended from this rich family or whatever? Like, it just feels really weird that they didn't establish that earlier. And I know why. It's because they needed someone to get them from point A to point B. They needed someone to get them from wherever they were to get to Madripoor. So they needed someone with a plane. So they just wrote in that Zemo is a rich baron descended from a rich family, has his own frickin' butler, and has a plane. Which doesn't even make sense to me, because since he was arrested, wouldn't all of his property have been taken? I guess it would have gone to his butler, but still, like, wouldn't his butler have been arrested or something for being complacent in Zemo's criminal acts? Like, I don't understand any of that. Like, I don't. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, why wouldn't his private freaking jet have been confiscated? How does he just walk out of jail and his butler's just like, "Welcome back, sir. Let's go on an adventure." Like, that just, I don't know, never made sense to me. So I like the conclusion of Zemo's character. I like the different ideologies that he brings to the table. I like that his kind of statement is a thesis for everything that happens with Carly and the Flag Smashers. I don't love his introduction and the way that they retcon his character. I'm very conflicted on him, but I feel like he's one of the weaker parts of the show. The Dora Milaje element, it makes sense. It's another example of what I was saying before about how they tie in Marvel plot elements pretty well. That makes sense, that they would be going after Zemo because of what happened to the King and all that. I like that, and that they would be angry at Bucky, and then how they basically have a failsafe in Bucky's arm, which probably even makes Bucky feel betrayed by them because of the fact that maybe they never even trusted him fully after they got the Winter Soldier programming out of him. I like that. The thing I don't really like is that they just show up in whatever they are, in Prague or whatever, and then they show up, John Walker's like, "Hey, I'm John Walker," and they just start fighting everybody else except for the person they're there to capture, and then Zemo ends up escaping in the sewer or whatever. But, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, John just, like, he just talks to them. Sure, he's being a snobby guy or a self-conscious guy or whatever you want to say, but, like, why did they start fighting? Like, it doesn't even make sense. They just, like, they were gonna, like, freaking stab John Walker and shit. I'm like, wait, so you're just gonna, like, kill a bunch of people? Like, that doesn't even make sense. They were, like, beating up John and Lamar and Bucky and Sam. And then Zemo's just, like, I'm gonna dip, and then, like, goes out the door. And I'm like, wait, like, why would you just, like, you don't even have to bother fighting these guys. They don't even put up, like, a decent fight against you. They're no match for you. Just get the guy you're here to get. Like, why don't you just go get Zemo? But Zemo's just like, all right, peace. Like, if they'd, like, written in something where it was, like, Zemo had, like, planned all this or something, and it was, like, he set up some kind of distraction, like, lured John there or something. But, like, I don't know, like, it feels oddly placed in the story. Like, maybe if they'd done that later after he had the serum or something. But it feels weird that they placed it there in the story, that they just start fighting all them for no reason. Like, I don't even, like, they just start fighting everyone except the guy they're there to capture, and then he ends up escaping. Then Bucky has to freaking lure him in, or whatever, like, go find him in Sokovia, and then find him for the Dora Milaje. Like, that whole element felt really freaking weird. Like, I don't know, just to make a lot of sense to me. And then one element that I don't know if I think is necessarily bad, but that I'm still very conflicted on, is the conclusion to John Walker's character arc. Now, like other people, I don't have a problem with the idea that he ends up saving the people and becoming a good guy by the end, because he never was a bad guy. He was a good guy, a good person who made mistakes and who was traumatized and was basically used by the government. So I don't mind him saving the people. I actually love that. The thing I don't really like is that Valentina Fontaine or whatever shows up and then recruits him, and then he's perfectly fine with being part of a government role again. Because the way I saw it was like there's the symbolism with him dropping the shield, you know, in front of Bucky or whatever to save the people. And I don't know, in that moment, I just thought that was like symbolizing that he realizes he doesn't have the right to be in this role anymore, so he's going to give it up. But I didn't understand why the government was just like perfectly happy with him again, and he just walks up to all these government officials after the battle, and they're all just friends again. And it just didn't really make a lot of sense to me. Like, I was just kind of like, all right, man. Like, you know, like, I don't know, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I didn't really love that he was just perfectly willing to accept it. I understand that he's being manipulated by what's her name because she's evil, but I didn't really like the way they concluded that. Part of me just feels very conflicted by it. It still doesn't completely sit right with me, but it's not like terrible or anything. I still think John Walker's character is great and one of the best freaking Marvel characters ever written, or at least out of the MCU. But yeah, it's just that was great. But that's pretty much all I have to say about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and why I love it so much. It just has everything that I appreciate out of a superhero story. It feels realistic. It's set in a palpable world. You know, like, when I mean a palpable world, I mean like something that deals with realistic issues, things that I can relate to on a human level. Because at this point, Marvel it gets so boring for me. Like, after 13 years of watching superheroes shooting punchy punch lasers at each other or whatever, I just, like, I can't even freaking watch it. You know, it's just like, I'm numb to it. And the fact is, this show doesn't even really feel like a Marvel show. And it honestly opened my perspective to how you can structure a TV show, because I'm not even a TV show person. But the way the show was structured was almost like a film. It was almost like it followed the 3-act structure of a film, but in a TV show format. It was like 6 episodes, so you have like the first act. So I would say like the first 2 episodes, and then like halfway through the 3rd episode is like, or towards the end of the 3rd episode is like the first act. Then, you know, the 4th and 5th episodes are the 2nd act, and the 2nd act low point is the 5th episode. And then the 6th episode is the 3rd act, where you have the final battle and all that. But it's not a super over the top like shooty shoot punch lasers finale. It's actually a really grounded finale, which I like a lot. And I don't agree with people who say it's rushed. So yeah, I like that as well. Like, it's honestly opened up, like, if I ever, you know, endeavor to make films or television in the future, which is something that I'm interested in, this show really opened my eyes to the concept of structuring television like a film. Like, the way this show handled its story was so much care, and it was so fascinating how they structured it almost like a film, but in a TV show format, which meant they could develop characters and stories so much more than they're able to in the films. So I freaking love that, you know? And I just want to say, like, this is how I feel a superhero story should be handled. The characters feel like real people with real flaws and real issues. The story feels realistic, but still has that, like, kind of, you know, I don't know what the right, like, kind of pulpy sense to it, where it's still a little bit over the top, a little bit comic booky and silly, but it's still like, and that's used as like a spice, kind of an extra flavoring to make it more entertaining. But deep down, it's like a really interesting story about philosophy and real world issues and real people, you know? And I love it. I actually adore this show. I think it's amazing, actually. I don't know why I love it so much. I do know why I love it so much, but it's just what I like, and I feel like it is the way superhero stories should be told. I love it. It's an amazing show in my mind, and it's my favorite thing to come out of the MCU. But Yeah, you guys just please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And if you do, please let me know why, because I've seen so many people say they dislike this show, and I don't really understand why. I don't know why that is, and I have never really seen anyone give, like, valid reasoning as to why they don't like it. So please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and for those of you who don't like it, let me know why, because I'd love to hear why. But yeah, just you guys, once again, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.